Testimony was heard on a bill looking to establish electronic gambling terminals at certain establishments, with some funds going to a variety of causes. The bipartisan proposal requires the owners of the machines to give 25% of the income to a fund going towards 10 different organizations. This includes Maine Veterans Homes, the Agricultural Development Fund, and municipalities in which the machines are located. Among those speaking against the bill was the Department of Public Safety, who say it would be an increase of gambling of over 2,000 of these machines.
With expansion, we would obviously need more staff. Additionally, with any gambling expansion comes the increase of harm to problem gamblers.
It provides the people of Maine an opportunity to increase revenues coming from those from away, who come to our state annually just to have fun. Gaming is spot on, and another reason to visit Maine.
A portion of the funding would also go towards state gambling addiction prevention services. The bill now moves to a work session for discussion.